Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Furs, Feathers, and Fangs Creature Feature, a weekly series in which I talk about some of the amazing animals we get to share this planet with. Now you'll notice my surroundings are a little bit different for this week's installment. I figured the day was just too nice to be cooped up inside, and sometimes I feel that my thoughts flow a little more freely when I'm not cooped up and just watching myself in a feedback monitor. So I came down to the lake today to do our creature feature. If you like it, I'll keep doing it. If I like it, more importantly, I'll keep doing it. Stay tuned. Now, because of some of the feedback I got from the Animal Gladiators video, I thought a little bit more about the history of man's interaction with the animal kingdom. And that got me to thinking what impact animals have had on mankind, not only in terms of the individual, but how has that progressed us as a civilization. And it's really amazing when you think about it, the leaps and bounds that we were able to take once we started to domesticate animals. Now, the very first animal we domesticated was the dog, and this was about 12,000 years ago. And it's highly debated as to where the dog first became man's best friend. And it's very popular to think that this happened somewhere in Ice Age Europe. The allure of the glow of the fire and the smell of roasting meat may have coaxed individual wolves closer into the encampments of early humans. And in doing so, it formed a bond. Once man and wolf figured out that they both had something that one could share, they became inseparable. Once a solid allegiance of man and wolf came into play, we started breeding qualities that we wanted as opposed to qualities that were natural in the wolf. We kept some of them. We kept the strong social bonds. We kept, in essence, the ferocity and the prey drive, but we bred out a lot of the aggression, and we molded the wolf into what we now know as the modern dog. And every breed of dog, from the Chihuahua to the Great Dane, shares those same genes and can trace its bloodline through millions of generations back to the gray wolf. Having dogs at our side gave early humans a competitive edge over other predators. It allowed us to teach them to hunt and help us not only capture animals, but track them. It also gave us a little bit more protection during the long, cold nights of the late Ice Age. Dogs being able to see, hear, and smell coming threats in the dark, and they would alert the rest of the village to the approach of danger. Another huge leap forward for mankind after the domestication of the dog was the domestication of goats and sheep. Now, early human civilization was based around hunting and gathering, which meant that there wasn't always a secure and promised source of protein in our diets. We had to hunt. And during early humankind's history, hunting meant going after megafauna, bison, giant elk, mammoth. It was a daunting task. So by catching early goats and sheep and raising them in domestic and protected herds, it meant that mankind, for the first time in his history, had a secure and protected supply of protein, not only by way of meat, but we also figured out that goats give milk and that humans can consume that milk and then later turn it into tasty, tasty cheese. But that wouldn't come for a little while. Now, because sheep also bear wool, it meant that not only was there now milk and meat available to mankind, but there was an option for clothing. Before that, man had just worn leather and animal furs, and now we had another viable option. And because sheep were domestic, they were a secure and semi-permanent source of clothing for early man. Sheep and goats were first domesticated in the Middle East, and they made it very easy for humans there to continue their nomadic ways. They moved their herds where the grazing and the water was good. But as civilization started to develop, they stuck their roots down and they started to create villages and cities. That's when we see the domestication of other animals that were made a little bit more permanent. About 7,000 years ago, cattle and pigs came into the equation. Cattle being first domesticated in parts of Western Asia, pigs, it is believed, were first domesticated in China. This added another permanent source of protein, and one that didn't rely on the nomadic nature of man as sheep and goats did. Now, pigs are great, bacon is great, but cattle were very much a multi-purpose animal. Not only did they give meat and milk, but we could use their hides for clothing. And about 4,000 years ago, about 5,000 years ago, we figured out that oxen were really, really good at pulling plows. This enabled man to clear land and plant larger crops. So not only was the cow giving itself as sustenance for mankind, but it enabled people to sow crops, wheat and barley and other grain that would sustain humans for a long, long time and be the basis of modern civilization. Now, at the same time, about 5,000 years ago, in the steppes of Asia, mankind came into perhaps his best partnership with an animal species other than perhaps the dog. And during this time, the nomadic people of the plains first domesticated the horse. And in doing so, this changed the way that civilization worked. Man was now not limited by where his own 2 feet could take him. He could ride the horse. He could use that to deliver messages, to hunt, to do just about anything. The horse has stayed with us not only to carry us, it could pull a plow, it could even go to war with us. And that is perhaps the largest impact that the horse had on the history of civilization. Now, nations could grow and armies could rise. And if you had the power of the horse, be it mounted archers or knights with lances or pulling chariots and wagons, if you had that advantage, odds are you were going to win the battle, you were going to conquer territory, your army would be the basis of an empire. Now, it's interesting the way that civilization works, because sometimes, no matter where we were in the globe, we had collective ideas. And one of these was the beast of burden. And during the same time, about 4,000 years ago, humans all over the planet figured out the value of having animals that could carry things for us, be it the domestication of the camel in Egypt, to donkeys in North Africa, to llamas and alpacas in the Andes Mountains, and even elephants in Southeast Asia. The domestication of these animals occurred almost at the exact same time, within about 500 or 1,000 years. And that's amazing, because it proves that if an idea is good, it can spread, even with no way of communicating. A little bit after we figured out how much other animals can help us, we started looking to other animals to domesticate, not just big ones. In the forests of Southeast Asia, there were creatures called the red jungle fowl, and they looked very much like pheasants do. But mankind took those birds out of the forests and out of the jungles, and they put them in coops. And over generations, those birds were transformed into what we know as chickens, another multi-purpose animal. Not only could they provide us with meat, but they could also provide us with feathers and with eggs. Who doesn't love a good egg in the morning? And around the same time, maybe up to about 3,500, 3,000 years ago, we get another animal ally, one that now is relegated to role of really a pet in modern society, and this was the cat. Now remember how I said that animals being able to pull plows, oxen, horses, were changing the way civilization really produced food. All the cereal grains, the massive amounts of wheat and barley and rye that we were now producing had to be stored, because what we couldn't use immediately in making bread or beer, we had to store that excess grain. And where grain is stored, rodents will come. Rats, mice, and not only would they eat grain, but rodents are very, very good at carrying fleas that harbor diseases, notably the bubonic plague, which is also known as the Black Death, at one point wiped out a third of the population of Europe in the Middle Ages. So rats and mice were no good for grain crops. This is when a very, very adorable little guy came into humankind's lives, and that was the cat. Now, it's debated as to where cats were first domesticated. Some people say Eastern Europe, some say Egypt, some say parts of the Middle East, including Iraq and Iran. But one thing is clear: once the cat came into the picture, it was a game changer, because now we had an animal that we could let live in our grain silos, and it would take care of the vermin that plagued the way we stored our food. And rates and diseases dropped, all thanks to an animal that really, his only interest in people is that we gave him, or her, we gave the cat somewhere that it could come in out of the cold, and we gave it a guaranteed food supply. And some people argue that to this day, we need cats a lot more than they need us. Cats can go off and they can survive anywhere they go. Would it have been true of civilization if the cat hadn't come to our aid? I'm a dog person personally, but I will take this moment to give the cat its proper praise. The cat did wonders for helping civilization in its infancy rise to what it is now. I sure hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Creature Feature, and I hope that you like the new digs as much as I do. I really am seriously considering coming out here and doing all my creature features here. What do you think of the video? If you have any thoughts, any comments, any questions about how society has come about domesticating animals and how they have been beneficial to us, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section below. If you like the video, be sure to give my buddy Quimby here a click. Like I said before, he doesn't mind. Go ahead and subscribe to us. If you really like it, follow us on Facebook at Furs, Feathers, and Fangs. This has been Zach. As always, have a wild day.